Erev Shabbat Shalom Rabotai. We are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Maasrot. We're up to Perek Bed Mishnah Zayin. Today's Mishnayot should be Nishmat Neria ben Tzvedlana Aranbayev and Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov Minuchatam Began Eden. Amen. Today's Mishnah is going to discuss someone who buys produce by working for it rather than by paying money. The Torah says in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 23, Psukim 25 to 26, with Rashi there based on the Gemara and Baba Mitzia, that someone who's hired to work with produce that has not yet that's not yet completely processed, he has the right to eat from it while he works. Now, this is not part of the payment. It's a special right given by the Torah to the workers. Therefore, whatever he takes under this rule is not considered bought, and it can be eaten without separating Maasrot. However, there are circumstances where a worker is not entitled to take and eat under this halacha, but he arranged with the owner at the time that he was hired to be given the right to eat. That produce is considered to be bought because it is payment for his work. Therefore, you cannot eat it as a snack without separating Maasrot. Our Mishnah today is going to teach us when produce that's eaten while it's being worked on is considered bought and when it's not. The Mishnah says, if someone hires a worker to help him spread out figs to dry, Amarlo, and the worker said to him, Al menat shochal tenim, I will work on the condition that I can eat figs while I work. Ochelu patur, the Mishnah says, he may eat figs as a snack and he's exempt from separating Maasrot, because even though the worker said he wanted to be able to eat the figs as part of his wages, he was entitled to them as a worker anyways based on Torah law. Therefore, the figs he takes are not considered payment for his work and he can eat them as a snack without separating Maasrot. However, if he says, Al menat she'achol ani u'bnei beti, if he says, I will work on the condition that I and the members of my household can eat figs, which Mefarshim explain that he made a condition that his household members should be allowed to eat in addition to what he is entitled to by Torah law, or she'uchal bini bischari, or I will work on condition that my son can eat figs as part of my wages, which the Mefarshim explain the son is not working for the owner. Now, the father who's working wants to transfer his right to eat to his son, meaning he wants his son to eat instead of him. Now, although he says he wants his son to eat figs as part of his wages, he really means that he wants his son to take over his biblical right to eat as a worker. This is how the Gemara explains it. Hu ochelu patur. He, the worker, can eat it and is exempt from separating Maasrot from what he eats because he eats by right and not by agreement. And his son or other members of his household, they may eat because the owner of the field agreed to the condition when he hired him. But he's obligated to separate Maasrot first, because since the son is receiving figs only as payment for his father's work, those figs are considered bought and they must have Maasrot separated before they can be eaten. Now, although the worker wanted to transfer his biblical right to his son, he cannot do this because the right is given by the Torah only to the worker himself and it's not transferable to anybody else. Therefore, the son's right to eat in this case is only because the owner agreed to make this part of the worker's wages. Therefore, the figs are considered bought. They cannot be snacked on without separating Torah and Maasrot. Another case, Al menat she'ochal bishat k'tzi'ah achar k'tzi'ah. If the worker says, I will work on the condition I can eat figs while we spread them out to dry, and even after we spread them out to dry, bishat k'tzi'ah ochelu patur. He may eat figs at the time he spreads out the figs to dry and he's exempt from separating Maasrot. However, after they have been spread out, he can eat them because, again, that was one of the conditions he made with the owner, but he's obligated to separate Maasrot before eating them. Because he is not eating at the time based on the right granted to him by Torah law. Therefore, that right, the Mefarshim explain, only applies while he's working with the produce. Once he finishes spreading them out, he's no longer working on the figs. Now, he may eat afterwards because the owner gave him a right to do so as part of his wages. But since Torah didn't give him any right, he must therefore separate Maasrot before he eats them. This is the rule. The Mishnah concludes. Someone who eats produce based on the right granted to him by the Torah as a worker is exempt from tithing the produce. However, someone who does not eat based on the right granted to him by the Torah, but only by the agreement he made with the owner, is obligated to separate Maasrot before eating that produce. That is in Rabotai Mishnah Zayin. Mishnah Chet now moves on to discuss, now that we spoke about the halacha, exempting a worker from separating Maasrot from produce he eats while he works, the Mishnah is going to teach us now a halacha about what kind of produce a worker has the right to eat. This is mainly, the Mefarshim explain, it's mainly brought down in chapter 7 of Baba Metzia, Mishnayot 2-6. The Mishnah says, Haya oseh bilvasim. If someone was working with levasim figs, a type of low-quality fig, lo yochal bivnot sheva. He may not eat bivnot sheva figs, which is a type of high-quality fig. Bivnot sheva, if he was working with bivnot sheva figs, the high quality, lo yochal bilvasim, he may not eat levasim figs, the lower quality. Because the Mefarshim explain, a worker is allowed to eat only from the type of fruit with which he is working. And the Rav quotes for us, because the pasuk says, "Ki tavo bekerem re'echa v'achalta anavim." When you enter the vineyard of your friend and you eat grapes, Mata molomar v'achalta anavim. What is the Torah telling us? And you eat grapes. We knew if you enter a vineyard, what does a vineyard have? Grapes. From here we learn that if you were working on dates or figs or anything else, you would not eat the grapes. And our Mishnah is teaching us that even if there are two varieties of the same species, if you're working on one variety, you cannot eat from the other. However, while he's working with the low quality figs, he may, if he wants, hold himself back from eating until he reaches the place where the higher quality figs grow, and he can then eat his fill while he works on them. The Mishnah now goes back to the subject of separating Maasrot from produce that was sold. Hamachalifim chavero, someone who trades produce with his friend in any of the following ways. Zeh le'echol v'zeh le'echol. This person gives some produce that he is ready to eat, and that person gives back other produce that he's ready to eat. Zeh liktzot v'zeh liktzot. Or this person gives some produce that was laid out to dry and not yet ready to eat, and that person gives him back other produce that was laid out to dry and was not ready yet to eat. Therefore, the Mefarshim explain, when the produce later finishes drying and is ready to be eaten, they will each be eating produce that has been exchanged. Or this person gives someone produce that is ready to eat, and that person gives them back produce that was laid out to dry and not yet ready to eat. Chayav. In all of these cases, each person is obligated to separate Maasrot from the produce before eating, because trading for produce is like buying it. Since each person traded for the produce he's now going to eat, he cannot snack on it without separating Maasrot. And the Mefarshim explain, based on the Yerushalmi, although the produce that was drying was not finished being processed when it was traded, this Tana follows the opinion of Rabbi Meir in Mishnah 5, who holds that selling sets the Maaser obligation even for produce that is not yet completely processed. Maasrot therefore have to be separated before it can be eaten as a snack. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, however, Rabbi Yehuda says, Hamachalif le'echol chayav, the one who trades for produce that is ready to eat is obligated to separate Maasrot before eating it, because it was completely processed when he, so to speak, bought it. V'liksot patur, but the one who trades for produce that has been laid out to dry is exempt from separating Maasrot, because the produce he, so to speak, bought was not completely processed when he bought it. And Mefarshim explained Rabbi Yehuda is consistent with his opinion in Mishnah number 5, where he holds that selling does not set the Maaser obligation of produce that was not yet completely processed. Therefore, it can still be eaten as a snack. However, like we said, it can only be eaten one by one, not if he gathers them two at a time, like Rabbi Yehuda says. And the Rav tells us, V'alacha ki Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. That is in Rabotai, today's Mishna Yomi and Perek Bet. Everyone should have a Erev Shabbat Shalom. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.